This is Lead Balloons, the alchemy of unpopular opinions. Well, hello, y'all. Welcome to yet another episode of Lead Balloons, the alchemy of unpopular opinions. My name is Joel, residing here in Dallas, and I get to connect virtually with this handsome fella over there with a brick background in Denver-ish area. How you doing, Trent?
Fantastic, man. Enjoying them at an undisclosed location in the Denver metro area. We don't want to give away too many details of that.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, that's where I am. That's right, brother.
I tell you what, we can't deal with all of the fans just trying to gather around, camp outside of our home, get our autographs,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Man, I get like 2 or 3 of those letters with the cutout magazine letters in them,
Yes.
like ransom notes. Some of them are threats. Most of them are just gushing about me. And, it's hard to be famous like us.
It is. It's tough. It's tough. Yeah, we could fill up a room easily with people who are fans.
Yeah. Medium-sized room. Yeah. Medium-sized one, maybe.
Yeah, 10 by 12. Yeah.
Okay, friends. Well, we are going to be talking about a topic that both Trent and I have witnessed, seen. We have some different perspectives on, but we're going to be talking about male friendship, and we'll get into this a little bit. But to start us off, Trent, what are some of your favorite movie, book renditions of male friendships?
That's a good one. That's a great one. I mean, I think of Frodo and Sam, Lord of the Rings. I think about Han and Luke.
Han and Luke, yeah.
Star Wars. What about yourself?
I mean, we can't forget Tombstone. Doc Holliday, Wyatt Earp.
That's just my game.
What's the quote?
He goes, Wyatt Earp is my friend. Oh, I got lots of friends. I don't.
Val Kilmer, R.I.P. Love you, buddy.
That was a great one.
I think about the friendship between Matt Damon's character in Good Will Hunting, Will and Chucky, Ben Affleck.
Yeah, that's right.
Just like bros or Boys in the Hood. There's a good one. Man, there's a good one, man.
Boys in the Hood. Sure. I mean, I wish I had a longer list here. I mean, Dune is one of my favorite books. I think of Paul Atreides and Gurney Halleck.
Yeah.
That's a great friendship. But
we go fantasy. We can go.
Sure.
Harry and Ron. Sorry, Hermione, you don't fit this discussion.
It's male friendship.
Three Amigos.
Those are big ones. The three Amigos going way back. Excellent. Yeah. Nicely done. Yeah, absolutely. Clutch. Yeah.
But the reason we're talking about this, guys, is because there was an article or a survey that came out not too long ago, and a bunch of other very legitimate sources picked it up and started writing articles about what they're calling a recession in male friendship. And we'll get into that survey here in a little bit. But ultimately, what we're seeing is in culture already, people talk about, for whatever reason, the perception is men struggle making and maintaining friendships with other men when you compare that to women. I know that that's a kind of a stereotype and it doesn't always apply. However, there seems to be some real data behind that. And so we want to talk about that and see what we think, what's going on in the culture. But let me start with you, Trent. Who was your first best friend and what made them your best friend?
Man, well, okay, I'm going to say this. I actually, I don't think that I've ever really had a best friend. I mean, I think that there have been moments when I've had a friendship. I think of a buddy that a friend of mine that I had when I was younger named Carson. I was like 10 years old, maybe for like a year. We were best friends. And then it would kind of rotate to another person. But, let's just say like Carson, or maybe there was Eric. These were a couple these were like elementary school friends. Usually we would bond over like sports,
Sports, yeah.
We played sports together, and so we'd really be into sports and watching sports and talking about sports, talking about girls, da 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 da. Some of these guys I went to summer camp with, but I mean, I think the thing I would say is I haven't really had, let's say, a best friend, but I think my proxy for that has been that throughout my life and in my adult life, I've tried to be more intentional about this.
Hmm.
I've had a collection, usually about 3 or so, give or take, but about 3 friendships that are really close friendships that I'm very intentional about following up with.
Yeah.
Um, whether I live in the same city or if I don't live in the same city, I'm going to be making fairly regular phone calls. Someone who lives in the same city, we're going to be hanging out, doing coffee, cigars, whatever, going out for dinner, whatever it is. But that's just kind of been my thing. When I was in, this may be going beyond your question, but when I was in college, I remember it was my senior year, and there were a number of guys that I wanted to develop stronger friendships with, and I wrote that down. And that was one goal that it wasn't like a New Year's resolution you don't do. I mean, that was a goal that I actually achieved. I followed through. I was like,
Hmm.
I want to develop and be consistent with these friendships, and I did, and it was a great thing, and those have endured, and that's been sort of a hallmark of my adult life is maintaining really close friendship. Maybe not as good as I should sometimes, but that's been my thing. So tell me about yours, man. Tell me about uh, your best friend and your approach and these kinds of things.
Yeah, I have a nuanced perspective too, but I'll first say, like, if you think you haven't been doing well, then we're all screwed because you were very intentional about it, and I've always admired that about you, Trent.
Hmm.
Um, growing up in elementary school and middle school and up until my junior year of high school, there wasn't really anyone I called my best friend. There were people that I was closer to, and like you, it was usually because of sports, and we might spend the night at each other's house the most. I always found myself strangely, I think I was just kind of a this typical nice guy, people pleasing kid, and I did really well when friendships were one on one. But if you got two or three, if
Mm.
there was another one, 3 or 4 guys, especially if there was three, I was always the one that got picked on, who got like made fun of or something.
No,
Always, always. If it was just
jeez.
me one on one with either, they were like super cool. But it's just that kind of age for boys, and they're just like, I think, growing in their hormones and trying to experience power. I was just low hanging fruit,
Yeah.
I think, for a lot of them.
Jeez.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and even in high school, I had a friend that I spent a lot of time with because we both played golf and on the golf team, which is not a very big team, and we just spent a lot of time together. We are constantly playing golf together. But I wouldn't have called him my best friend because we have very different kind of worldviews and
Mm.
values. But my junior year, I met a guy named Benji who was a senior, and he became like we bonded so quickly. I think our values were so close. Our faith at the time was really, really in alignment.
Yeah.
And both of us were kind of outliers a little bit in socially. And we bonded so quickly. And within those next like 10 years, we just were so close. We're constantly together. We did trips together.
Mm.
Benji ended up moving away, and then I went off to college. He moved away, and we kind of had a rift for a minute, as he no longer identified as a Christian. I became a pastor. We would talk on the phone some, but even during those times when we weren't
Mm.
talking as much and there was a bit of a rift, I went to like uh, serve as a pastor at this church in Texas, and wasn't making very much money, and I had to like raise some funds so that I could pay my mortgage. And he and his wife, neither of them Christians, sent me $100 a month. So it was just like
Wow. Yeah.
there was a bond there. And even to today, he lives on the other side of the country. We talk on the phone regularly. I've gone up and visited him a couple times. I wouldn't say we're nearly as close as we used to. So whatever the term best friend means is has some asterisks by it. Obviously, I
Sure.
would say I'm much closer to people I talk more often to, like yourself, a couple other friends that you know of mine. Um, but he still, in my mind, gets that best friend because he's my first like deep bond. Like I'll get a little graphic here, but like the first person that I ever admitted to. We had conversations about the fact that we both felt really guilty about masturbating. You know what I mean? And that might sound weird to other people, but like what that represents to me is whatever the deepest kind of shame a person can feel. If you can talk about that with another person, that relationship is gold, right? And is giving your soul oxygen. And that was the first time I experienced that, was with Benji.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to read some stats here, though, that are a little bit troubling, Trent. So this survey is done by the Survey Center on American Life, and this was done in 2021. So after COVID, basically, they were trying to like look at the impact on relationships, and they compared all the data from another survey done in 1990 around friendship. This wasn't just focused on men, but a lot of the big kind of data points that came out of this in comparing were about men. So the percentage of men with at least 6 close friends, which is a lot, by the way, fell by half since 1990. So from 1990 to 2021, 55% of men would say they had 6 close friends in 1990, 27 in 2021. The study also found the percentage of men without any close friends jumped from only 3% in 1990, now is 15%. So it's a fivefold increase of men
Mm-hmm.
who don't have any, they say they don't have any close friends, not best friends, just
Mm.
close friends. And then the survey goes on to say not only do men have smaller friendship circles, they report being less emotionally connected to the friends they do have. Both men and women benefit from developing strong emotional bonds with their friends, but women are more successful in establishing these types of relationships. So, Trent, what do you make of these statistics?
Yeah, man. Well, it's just crazy to think about. The first thing you think is, number one, you would just think that you would almost just take it for granted that human beings would be good at building social bonds and having friendships, but I guess that's not the case. And to see the decline that's happened since, I guess, since 1990, that's staggering. It's sad. It's concerning. I mean, when people are lonely, I don't think that there are that many introverts in this world.
Yeah.
I suspect that most people, I think, are extroverted. I'm not sure what the numbers are, but I think a lot of people are extroverted. And to see that men just don't have a lot of close friendships, very few close friends, and some with 15% with no close friends at all. That is staggering. That's staggering. And it's probably right to think about it. I mean, people have talked in recent years. I've seen books written about the loneliness epidemic, just
Mm-hmm.
dealing with men and women in general in our country. So it's affecting both genders, but it looks like it is affecting men even more. So yeah, I mean, I think it's crazy. What's your reaction to it?
Yeah, the thing you just highlighted there, obviously everyone's struggling with connection. I do think COVID had a dramatic impact on us socially.
Yeah.
I do think there's other factors likely as we become a more industrialized and now digitized world where virtual connection is replacing physical connection in so many ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just have to believe that that has an impact. I know there's a lot of writing and research around that. What is the impact of all this on us as human beings? But I start with the assumption that we did not evolve with screens and computers. We evolved in small communities as a
Mm-hmm.
species. And all of that has been slowly broken down by the evolution of our civilizations and the way we connect now. And what's interesting is that for some reason, men struggle more than women. And I can't, I know this might sound stereotypical and I don't have any research to back this up, but I can't help but feel that men are still kind of following some of these prototypes of the man, the Lone Ranger, these
That's right.
kinds of archetypes of the warrior who doesn't need anyone. Like it just feels odd to me that the stereotypes around men not being emotionally available and women being so like natural in terms of connecting with people, that I get that might have some biological truth in it. Like women are, in their bodies, they're made to create other human beings, so they have like in their biology some unique physiology that likely contributes to their ability to for empathy and for nurturing and for these kinds of things. However, it's both men and women need that bond. We all need it. And so to me, it's
Mm-hmm.
very hard to understand why this problem persists when all it really takes is for someone to make phone calls. That's that's all it really takes. There's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of people, and not all of them are going to respond in friendship to me, but if I just keep trying, eventually someone will. It's not don't you think?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a number of ways that we can start talking about this thing. I think about this topic, and one of them is like, what are how can people in general, and men in particular, find friendships? And I think you and I would agree that that's a conversation worth having. Is, do we have as many venues as we used to have for finding friendships? So that's an interesting discussion. But I think you wouldn't have to think too long to realize that if you decided you're reasonably well adjusted, let's deal with sort of the average man who's probably reasonably well adjusted socially. If he wants to find friends, it's really not that difficult. You go down to the local pool hall. You join a extracurricular sports league, a book club. You can take a class in this thing. You can, if you're a religious person, you can get involved at a church. I mean, it's, if you want it, it's really probably not that difficult to get it. But I think so. I want to key in on something that you said, sort of that male attachment to the Lone Ranger. I've listened to some people who would probably describe themselves, some internet personalities who describe themselves as like libertarians, and there are some things
Mm-hmm.
that I think are commendable about libertarianism. But I think one of the things that gets sort of, or that's assumed with that political orientation, is that we live in a world where, sort of like in a utopian vision of libertarianism, everybody is sort of 100% self-sufficient. You would
Mm-hmm.
live on a 10-acre plot of land. You would construct, many guns that you have to protect your property were all handmade by you, because you smelt all your own iron. You make all of your own
Yeah.
bullets, all of your own gunpowder. You make everything. You do everything. It's this libertarian vision of the world. It
Economy
seems
is
to,
me. I am
I am the
economy.
economy, and
Yeah.
the it ignores the deep interconnectedness of,
Mm-hmm.
particularly of modern society. Maybe 100,000 years ago we did pretty well as Lone Rangers, but actually not even then. We lived in communities where we depended upon each other in so many ways. But I would say, even in this day and age, like, I can't even eat unless there's 800 different supply chain steps that are being coordinated.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so complex. But they have this vision of, I can go stay on my compound, on 40 acres, and do this all by myself. And I think that perpetuates this notion that I don't have to have friends. And if I can say a little bit more, Joel, the other thing too that I want to say about this is that when you adapt to a situation, you stop realizing that not only that you want something, but you need something. Like, you and I, human beings, can go a very short time without oxygen, a little bit longer without water, and a little bit longer without food. When we have those things, you can sustain life, but we can still go beyond that to talk about the needs that we have. Like, I think human beings have not a want for sex, but a need for sex, because living as a sexless human being is going to have lots of negative impacts, I would argue, on your long-term health. Um, so then there would be other things like friendship. I think friendship is a need, but if you adapt yourself to not have it, then you don't remember that it's a need. And then when you couple that with this Lone Ranger narrative that men buy into, this me and my Dodge Ram out in the wilderness all by myself, maybe my dog too. When you buy in, you couple that narrative with the narrative of I don't really need other people, then and you don't feel that need, and it's just a want, you get used to it, you're not going to have friendship. Now that doesn't explain all of the cases, I'm sure we'll get to more, but I do think that that's a major recipe, if I can say, for male loneliness.
Yeah. I think you're right. That there is stories that we idolize, kind of the John Wayne, Clint Eastwood kind of characters. And that's why I love movies like Tombstone, because in Tombstone you have these kind of badass cowboys, but what they're demonstrating is that we need each other, that there's deep bonds
Yes.
like Wyatt Earp and his brothers and Doc Holliday, and you see even the kind of the villains of the movie, the cowboys with the red sashes, they have a community and a bond and a loyalty, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I just
Hmm.
think that's how we're actually made. Um, and so, yeah, I want to get into this a bit. So, there's
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
article from the New York Times entitled, "Why is it so hard for men to be close to each other, to make close friends?"
Hmm.
And the author is kind of going off of this survey, and offers three practical tips that I want to use to kind of like move us along in this conversation on how to assist with loneliness and friendship. So, the first ones might take a little bit more time to unpack than the others, but it says practice vulnerability even if it makes you uncomfortable. So, practice vulnerability even if it makes you uncomfortable. So, Trent, how do you understand the word vulnerability, and why do you think it's both important and uncomfortable for men?
Well, I agree with the spirit of this piece of advice. I want to be a little nitpicky on the language a little bit. Um, First, let me talk about the spirit of it. I think that, well, no, let me talk about the language because it'll lead into the second thing I want to say. I don't love the word vulnerability because I think it implies weakness, and I think selling weakness to men is it's a tough sell. Now, that's just the connotation that I get from
Mm-hmm.
vulnerability, being vulnerable. I I don't think that men want to and maybe even should be vulnerable in the sense of demonstrating publicly or with their friends weakness necessarily. I would I would be more interested in talking about authenticity, realness. Um, and maybe that doesn't capture everything, but I think it's important for men to find friendships and groups of men that they can be authentic with and share what's really going on. And that at times might involve tears, that might involve revealing things, and maybe what some people would call vulnerability. But I think that's really, really important. And here, I think this touches on the need that we have in our society for men to be okay more generally with identifying the things that they need and going after those things. Saying to men, recognizing that you have needs and prioritizing those and being selfish towards those is not wrong. You don't only exist for society. You don't only exist for your company. You don't only exist for your wife, and you don't only exist for your kids. You are a human being yourself, and you have needs. And so I would say I agree big time with the idea that it's important for men to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in time with men that they have built trust with, where they can feel okay saying, hey, you know, I had a really rough week, or, even friends that would be there if you said, hey, I'm feeling like I'm going to self delete here. I need you. Like having those kinds of friends that you can be super real with. So yeah, I'm on board with it. I would nitpick over the word, but what's your take on it, Joel?
Yeah, I think we definitely see that differently, but I get where you're coming from as authenticity being a more marketable, like palatable word for most men. But I think it's more marketable, more palatable because there is a misunderstanding and there is a resistance to that idea of weakness. Here's the issue. Vulnerability doesn't mean weakness. It means opening myself up to attack. Like, to be vulnerable means I drop my sword. Or, to be vulnerable means I take off my armor. I might still be a strong badass, right? But what I'm doing, what that generally
Okay.
applies in how I would see that, because I think what you were talking about, authenticity, I would call vulnerability, and
Hmm.
it's kind of maybe a Venn diagram of both of those overlapping, being real, but also being real, choosing to be real about things that might be a little scary to share, and that's where the vulnerability comes in, because you're opening yourself up to attack socially.
Right.
So that's what I mean by that. By showing that I'm struggling is actually revealing what some men would call weakness. But I think we're confused about what weakness means. Most of the stories of weakness are actually just being human. And so
Hmm.
I think that that's where we have some issues around the word. I love the idea of being vulnerable, because I think the only way to become invulnerable is to be comfortable with vulnerability.
Hmm.
That's how I kind of see it. The moment I am not comfortable with vulnerability, I hide parts of myself, and I make myself vulnerable to all kinds of things happening to me, because I'm unwilling to be fully authentic. And so, yeah, I agree that the word authenticity has much more, I think, has a better, it sells better in kind of your typical male market. But I think vulnerability, it's a little more precise on the thing that's missing in terms of the kind of authenticity that is required to build trust. Because if
Hmm.
I don't open myself up to another individual, they're going to feel that, and they're not going to want to open back up to me either. And you have this almost like the pseudo trust, this where there's not, you guys don't really fully know each other, and so that is going to have diminishing returns on our ability to, like, if someone doesn't fully know me, I'm going to want, naturally going to want to share less with them. And so
Hmm.
I think that's kind of like where that friendship breaks down, when we can't get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So that
Hmm.
might be the best phrase that sells to men. Just like, I think vulnerability is strength. I think it is actually someone going like, I will take the armor off, bring it. I'm fully me, and I make no apologies. That to me
Hmm.
is like masculine vulnerability.
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, this is you definitely make me think about it. I think that, yeah, I was part of a church years ago where they had a I won't say men's group, but the men would get together on a fairly regular basis and maybe talk theology, but more often than not talk about sports or movies or,
Sure.
relationships and these kinds of things. And it was a great time. But the one thing I will say is there was almost like a tacit prohibition of getting too real and letting the guard down, because we had some pretty classically masculine guys in that group, which was great. But I felt like there weren't times where guys would drop the guard enough to, and it doesn't have to be all the time, but like some of the time, let me see who you are. I see the strength, but let me see maybe some of the weakness too. Let me I have to earn that right to see it, but it's good to hear from people that, hey, this affected me, or I'm having a bad week, or it's just not working. And I think it's important for in the company of men for those moments to happen. I know some of the most
Mm.
powerful moments I've ever seen in like a movie. There's there's a I don't know if you ever saw the movie Shadowlands with
Oh
Anthony
yeah.
Hopkins, but it's one of my
C.S. Lewis,
favorite
bro.
movies. Yeah, and the scene there, I mean, and maybe in that movie he's reasonably, he presents as a reasonably masculine guy, fucking bigger badass than I am. That guy fought in World War I in the trenches,
Mm.
man. So
Yep.
I ain't got nothing on that guy. But there's a moment after his wife dies, and he's kind of been holding it in. He's there sitting with his stepson, Douglas, and Douglas is asking him like questions about heaven and hell, and then Douglas starts to break down in tears because he's saying he misses his mom, and then this is just a few days after her death, I think, and then you see Anthony Hopkins just totally just
Mm-hmm.
lose it. The dam breaks. He just totally lose it, and it's extremely powerful scene because of the fact that you knew that he was holding it all in, and you were almost just begging for him to just let it go.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not asking guys to stop their masculinity, but we're saying a fully orbed male life, I think, is a life in which you access this bullshit. I mean, I'll shut up in a second. You're getting me on my
No, bring
soapbox
it.
here,
I
but
love it. I love
but
it.
it's like I don't this I often hear it said, oh, women are more emotional than men. And it's like
No.
that might be true in the sense that I think women have become more comfortable with expressing their emotions, but I don't know if there's any data to support the notion that women are experiencing more emotions than men. Men are expected to be tough and stoic. And I think that's one of the reasons why they're not expressing their emotions, but that doesn't mean that they don't have all of them. I think that's people just throw it out there. Oh, women are more emotional than what? Who says? Where is that written? I should like to know.
Yeah. There is no data to support that. I mean, there's a lot of neurology or neuroscience that would kind of point to some different differences, but the differences are minor. We talked about this in some other podcasts where I mentioned the book Pink Brain, Blue Brain, where the brain is a genderless organ. It doesn't have a penis or a vagina. It's just a brain, right?
Yeah.
And so this idea that we physiologically on a DNA basis behave significantly different is actually conditions that we grow up and we kind of like marinate in as a kid, and it changes the way we think and view and behave. And society and culture and norms, all these sorts of things contribute way more to that difference of emotions than our actual genders. And so that's, I think there's quite a bit of arguments around that. And I think that's so, I think you're pointing out some really powerful things there, Trent, in terms of we live in a society where men feel like they have to live up to this story, and whether it's a dad telling their kid, don't cry, kind of thing. But guys, I have tear ducts. I was born with them. I think everyone was. Guess what? They're meant to be used, not
Mm-hmm.
just to get dust out of our eyes. They are the natural expression. And at some point with my, I'm the dad of two daughters, so I didn't have to really like parent around the stories of masculinity in my household.
Right.
but
Right.
but even with my daughters, one of my daughters in particular is very, very uncomfortable with expressing emotions that aren't anger.
Mm-hmm.
She's fine with expressing anger, but she is very uncomfortable with anything
Mm-hmm.
else. And that to
Yeah.
me is the kind of trait that shows up in a lot of men too. And it's around feeling like I'm making
Mm.
myself vulnerable and making myself look weak. And I'm making myself feel out of control, which is another I think a behavioral adaptation. A lot of men feel like they have to be in control of things. It's just like,
Right. Right.
actually, what if I just allowed tears and didn't have a story about them being wrong? Instead, I personally reframe it. I see tears as having a shower for my emotions. If I work hard
Mm-hmm.
and I get grimy, I go take a shower. I don't think that
Right.
makes
Right.
me weak. And if I have a rough day because there's stress and I cry some tears, took a shower. Right. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think people just need a reframe around these things
Hmm.
so that they can understand it. Actually, there's nothing proven to say that that is weak. It's just there's stories that we get from hundreds, thousands of years ago. I don't know. It just feels like you got kind of like Arthur and the Knights, round table. They're all over. We are all so noble. We only feel righteousness, and I just it's not human. And so I wish guys could give themselves permission to be more human. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I would say, and I'd say, like, if there's ladies listening to this, I would say, the number of times that you see a man cry, for every time that you see a man cry, there's probably about 9 times that he felt like crying and
Mm-hmm.
didn't.
Yep.
And there's about 10 times where he probably ought to have felt like crying and didn't because he's so cut that nerve off.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being, and I would say very, very rarely do I cry. It's usually at a very unexpected moment, watching a movie or thinking about something in
Mm-hmm.
a conversation or a song or whatever it is. But I know I was in a therapy session almost 20 years ago, and like I was, I felt like it was I was talking about something that felt like should have made me cry, and I didn't cry. It's like, and my therapist wasn't saying you need to cry,
Yep.
but I had this sense like this should be drawing tears, and I can't even. I felt numb. I
Mm-hmm.
felt numb, and I realized that probably is a product of conditioning. So
Yeah.
that there's men who feel like crying and don't, and there's men who've been cutting off that sensation for so long that they can't even feel it anymore. That is one of, I think, the main reasons that you don't see. Why don't I see men crying? It's because they don't feel like there's a safe place to be able
Mm-hmm.
to do that. You know,
And
I
they've never been
feel
taught that it actually isn't unsafe. They've been
yeah,
told it is unsafe their whole life, and it
right.
because I mean, if imagine if you're a middle schooler and you're crying, what's going to happen? You're going to get made fun of.
Fun of.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely.
There are real consequences in our society to being vulnerable in that way, and
Yeah.
that's why we
Yeah.
learn to not do it.
Yep.
Okay, so let's shift to this is a great conversation, Trent. I think you're so
Yeah, it
right
is.
about
Yeah.
men and tears, and oh, I was just going to add like this
Mm.
has started happening to me in maybe the past 4 years, 5 years, where I began to notice. I think it's always been true, but when I tell someone, especially someone I love, uh, I'm thinking like my wife or my daughters, and I say it always takes me by surprise. If I say something that deeply resonates as true, I will have a wave of emotion that makes me start to have tears.
Mm.
And I might just be talking to my wife Poonam and just say, I'm just so grateful for you. And then all of a sudden, I just said those words.
Mm.
It unlocks something inside of me, and I just begin to
Mm.
cry. And I'm like,
Wow.
oof. And it's such a dead giveaway to her. She knows when I'm being so honest because immediately I start like getting
Uh,
teary eyed. And
right.
I honestly see that as strength. I think that's a superpower of mine where I am at least in that sliver of my
Mm.
being, I have no hindrances. Nothing blocks me from being
Mm.
authentic.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I just like to add like I try to like challenge those stories and say, actually, what you think is
Mm.
strength, I call weakness. Because the reason you have that armor on is because you're always afraid. What's up,
It's fear.
pussy?
It's driven by
Yeah.
fear. That's
Take
right.
off
It's
your
driven
armor.
by fear.
Take off your armor if you're so brave and courageous.
Yeah, yeah, your story about what it means to be a man, you're so wedded to that you're so
Yeah.
terrified of putting that
Yeah.
down and being seen. It's an act of courage. I'm not talking about breaking down all the time as a
No.
guy, but if you can't let your emotions show authentically, if you can never do that, it's not a sign of bravery. It's a
No.
sign of fear, I'd
Yeah,
say.
it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, fear and insecurity. Yeah, I agree. All right, so number two, don't assume friendship happens organically, which I think is
Mm.
super practical. Like these kinds of things, they
Yep.
should just happen. So I think Trent, you and I have to admit that we might be outliers in kind of the
Yeah.
social strata of society. However, why do you think men seem to prioritize friendship lower than other responsibilities or needs, as the word you used?
Yeah. Um Man, I've got multiple thoughts here.
Great.
I think that well, okay, Joel. So you and I have been pretty good at forming and maintaining friendships and we've chosen to make that a priority. And so I think questions that I would have are, do other men really want friendships? You
Yeah,
know,
that's
we
that's
say that
fair.
they're lonely, but do they want them? A, B, if they do and they're not getting them, what are the forces that are stopping them from doing that? So, I mean, I would say that there's a lot of things, having a crazy busy schedule. Okay, so I think that, right or wrong, we have the provider protector archetype for the
Yeah.
American male. And I think increasingly in our culture, it's not just provider of a roof of room and board. It's
Mm-hmm.
the sense that men are sensing that they need to provide a luxury lifestyle, whether they're being driven to do that or not. But it's this sense that I need to provide and I need to protect. I've got to be there. I'm talking about like married men here. This
Sure.
is, for married men, but um, single men, different kinds of concerns. So I think men feel a lot of burdens too. I need to be working harder. I need to be at home with my family. It's sort of that nuclear role that they feel. And I think that gets in the way of them developing the kind of friendships that do take time and effort. Um, and and maybe too, sometimes their wives or their girlfriends or whomever are more proactive about making those things happen, and they get so used to their wives or their girlfriends setting up the social situations that then they just don't put forth any effort. But I don't know, when we talk about the loneliness epidemic and we think about how terrible it is for so many friendless males, I think my thing, Joel, is, especially you and I, having made it a priority, put it in our calendar, written it down, pursued it, been consistent about it, I just have so little sympathy, given that I think previously in this conversation, we've been able to identify that finding friends really isn't that difficult to do. Um, why men aren't doing it might be a more of a complex discussion, but I just don't have a lot of sympathy for men who who feel lonely because they haven't made the effort to cultivate friendships. It is something that you can decide to do. You can decide to eat healthier. You can decide to get fit. You can decide, there's a lot of things that are out of our control, but we can decide to have friendships. And I guess my challenge to men out there is like, what's holding you back, man, from having great friendships? The friendships, the camping trip that you went on that was like one of the great moments of your life, or the night you went out with the guys and you had some beers and you had a conversation about something you'll never forget in your life, or when you were there for a friend and they are so thankful, and something happened in a friend's life and you went there to be there for them and it cemented that friendship. Do, do you ever allow yourself to miss those things and say, God, it was such a great bond, and you retreat back into your normal comfortable life where everything's going fine and you just sort of numb yourself to the deep sense that you have that there could be something more? That's what I would challenge people with, challenge men with, is why have you gotten so used to not having friends? It's good for you. What's your take, Joel?
I think you're right that for a vast majority of men, effort is really it. And there's a lack of value that they have. They just don't see it as valuable. Most men, I'm thinking of just men who are well adjusted, who have a job, and they maybe have a family. They are bought into this story of the protector, provider, and the achiever. I would say that too. Like they are
Yeah.
climbing those ladders. They are trying to make that money. They are trying, a lot of them turn into workaholics. They get their identity there, and they just don't see value in that because they believe friendship is unimportant. And if you pull back layers, the reality is friendship requires vulnerability, and they want nothing to do with that. And so I think that there's some practicality there. I do think there are a lot of people out there who don't have friends who would love to have them, but
Mm,
you asked a question I think is really important. You
mm,
said, what's holding you back?
yeah.
And some men, the answers to those are quite legitimate. It might
Mm,
be they are
okay.
following the model their dad gave them, or they have been abused in some way, shape, or form that has
Mm,
really impacted their ability to trust
mm,
and to put themselves out
yep.
there. You'll see people who only know how to only open themselves up to like pets and animals.
Mm,
That to me is a marker of someone that has some serious trauma that's unresolved because they don't know how to trust people, and
mm,
they only know how to trust mammals who are severely weaker than them and that they can like control. And those are the things that those are the kind of beings they can open themselves up to. that none of these are judgments coming from me, by the way,
Sure, sure.
because again, these are often legitimate things. However, the obstacle is the way. If you can identify what it
Mm.
is that's getting in the way, that is the thing that needs to be addressed. So if it's trauma, these things can be addressed and healed and help us open up further. I think of the movie uh Good Will Hunting, right? Here's this badass kid who
Mm.
grew up in the foster care, and he's got this good buddy, but he can't stay open to like relationships, right? And what is revealed that he suffered a lot of abuse when he was
Mm.
younger. When
Mm.
and Robin Williams, the famous scene, "It's not your fault. It's not your fault." I cry every time. I
Mm.
just
Mm.
weep every time I see
Yep.
that.
Yep.
And that's what he needed. He needed to address and heal and release that hurt so that he could open himself up to someone else, which was the girl that he went after and had just broken up with, Minnie Driver, right? And so that's where my brain goes with some of that. Is just like, okay, there are obstacles that are legitimate, and we have a diverse audience. But for a lot of people, it really is the beliefs that you have. You actually don't believe friendships are valuable, and that's like telling someone it's not really important that you get protein. Like there are certain things we biologically need. We need protein, and we need connection. There's
Mhm.
tons of research out there. It's not really debatable. What are your thoughts on that, Trent?
Yeah, well, I want to return back to those are great thoughts, Joel. I want to return back to I'm glad you mentioned Good Will Hunting because that scene, dude, that devastates me too. I just saw
Mm-hmm.
that a few weeks ago, that
Oh,
movie.
really?
And
Yeah.
it just obliterates me. I mean, that was like the 10th time I'd seen it. But I think, this is okay. So what if Robin Williams' character, I mean, I see him more of a friend. He's a therapist, but he becomes like a friend, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if he became something of a role model in our society? He became somebody of an archetype, sort of the wise, loving, masculine. He was masculine. Remember, like this first or second time he was around
He's
Matt
like,
Damon's character, he
yeah,
about kicked his ass because he
yep,
crossed the line. So
yep.
he's like, I'm a man. Don't cross my line. But if you will agree not to cross my line, there's all kinds of territory we can explore. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the thing that I love about his character that men could benefit from is he was he was not concerned about Will rushing off and becoming this corporate success. I mean, he was indifferent to it, but he
Mm-hmm.
cared about him and his healing and his growth and wholeness as a person. And that was so powerful that Will got to finally be with a person who could see him for what he was, who knew exactly he was. The Robin Williams character was a genius as well. So he
Mm-hmm.
saw that, he recognized it in him, but he was like, I don't care, what you might do in the corporate world. I care about who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a message that many men need to hear from other men,
Yes.
and that's part of the cultural narrative that needs to shift, which is, as men, what if we could get together and say, whether you're a corporate success or failure, whether you start a business and you become a millionaire or it fails, that's not relevant. What's relevant is that you are a worthy human being. You are a man. And we want to be here to be part of your story and to support your journey and not force you onto some artificial timetable to become something. But if men could feel some of that burden release so that in time, when the time is right, they can do the things vocationally that are meaningful to them and to other people and make them the money that they want, but they can feel the freedom to become who they are as men. And I think
Mm-hmm.
a lot of men don't feel like they have that opportunity. It's just, follow the script, go to school, do this thing, start climbing the corporate ladder, and it's all going to be good. And it's amazing to have those people in your life who can say, and I think you and a handful of other guys have been that for me as I've had this weird career journey. Is it's so great knowing that there are guys who want to have a friendship with me and do business with me, even if I haven't achieved all the things that I was supposed to achieve. But you
Fuck
see
that.
the
Yeah.
things that I have, that I bring to the table, and that's exciting. And so that's a great cultural opportunity for us, is men to start telling other men, fuck the script, man. Who are you? Let's learn about you and figure out what journey you want for yourself, you know?
Yeah.
So
I love that. Man, this conversation is getting super good and going kind of long. So I'm probably going to fast forward a couple of these questions, but I want to
yeah,
talk about all of them. The first one is,
yeah.
what do you think about the story that many men say, and I hear this all the time, that drives me bananas? It's like, we can't, we won't talk for years, but when we do, we just pick up from where we left. As if to say, like, we actually don't need to stay in touch. Our friendship's solid without any real connection.
Yeah, that's such a cope, to use the modern parlance. It's such a cope, man. I mean, yeah, okay, you can. But then the question is, why did you guys decide to, ditch your friendship for all those years?
Yeah.
You know, yeah, it's just a justification. That's my short answer.
Yeah, I
That's my
agree.
justification.
And I agree with that as one of the reasons. And I think the second thing I think is interesting is, like, I don't know about you, but if you can pick up from where you left off, that tells me you didn't grow or change at all since the last time you talked. So what you doing all that
Exactly.
time?
Right. Exactly. Yes. Exactly.
Like,
That's
if I
exactly
don't
true.
talk to
Yeah.
Benji for a year, we have a lot of catching up to do to be able to catch
Sure.
up on who are you now.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And guys are like, no, we just pick up from where we are. It's like, you're boring and basic, dude. That's what you
Boring.
are.
Yeah. You haven't grown at all. You're the same exact person. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the number 3 thing that they talk about in this article is
Mm.
harness the power of casual check-ins, which just sounds super like low bar, practical. What do you think of this advice?
That's great. And whether that's a text or a phone call, one practical. This is just a what if we could get back to doing this. I was even talking with one of my buddies here in Denver about this. It was like, I said to him, how would it affect you, or what would be your reaction if, like, one afternoon, like a Saturday afternoon, you hear a knock at the door? I haven't called you or anything like that, and I just surprise you and I pop in. And I'm not expecting to be entertained. I'm not even necessarily expecting that you're going to be available to do anything. I'm just knocking on the door saying hi. And I felt a little awkward even asking that question. And then we talked about it and how that would play out. And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly how humans behaved fucking 50, probably even 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember a story about Christian Bale talking to the actor when he moved to Los Angeles. He hated it for such a long time because when he used to live in the UK, it was such a common practice in the area where he lived, where his buddy would come over on whatever day, some random day, and he'd knock on the door, and Christian was like, if I was doing something, I would just say, hey, go hang out in the living room, watch TV. I got something to do. I'll be with you in a half hour. So whether you hang out, we stopped doing that stuff. And it's so weird. I think there was a practice years and decades and maybe hundreds of years ago where you always sort of had a pot of tea available because you were expecting that someone would stop in, because the days before telephones, you never knew when somebody would stop in. So I think that's something that we could consider culturally is the random drop in. I wouldn't be offended. I think that's cool.
Yeah, me too. I do think we have some things that have kind of practically made it harder. First of all, I have some friends that are Brazilian, and they say, "Man, just stop on over whenever. We don't care. We're used to it." But here in America, it's like that doesn't happen. And part of me, this might go back to like our podcast on cities, sans souls. The way we design cities now means you have to be in a car for 10 minutes to get anywhere.
That's
And
right.
versus neighborhoods that are more, closer knit, more walkable, and communities are tighter knit. We just don't have. I mean, I'm grateful that I know my neighbors, but that is because I'm very intentional about cultivating that. If I wasn't, we wouldn't know each other, because we live in a society and the way our cities are designed that makes that like difficult to do practically.
Yeah.
But I love the Christian Bale reference there. Man, he's one of my crushes, that guy.
He's great, man. He's a great actor.
Christian Bale and Ewan McGregor. Those guys, everything they're in. I love. All right, so we're going to close this out with some ooey gooey gushy stuff, Trent, if that's okay with you. We're going to do some strategic gushing.
Oh, God.
So, Trent, I want you to share I want to share with you why I value
Yeah.
our friendship,
Yeah.
and I'm going to allow you the opportunity to close out sharing about me. I might get a little teary-eyed sharing this though. So, like, on a more like kind of like pragmatic value, like my friendship with you, Trent, is it's about a lot of our compatibility. Like we have similar education and background. That just creates a similarity of conversation. We have similar interests. We both like to hike. We both like the outdoors. We value moving, and I think both of us have a sense of humor that's similar. And I just want to highlight that
Mm,
I think that we have some compatibility issues that I think are good. But going deeper, there's just I think we have similar values.
mm,
We
mhm,
both value kindness, we value honesty, we value courage. And one of my favorite things is humility. Like,
mm,
Trent, I can't, it's hard for me to have sustained friendship with someone who takes themselves too seriously.
mm,
It grosses me out. um I think humility is a one of the surest signs of maturity, and if someone doesn't have that, it deeply limits, for me, the freedom to talk about things that I care about.
mm,
And if I'm talking about like deeply vulnerable, important things with someone who can't go there because they think they got all the answers, blah, 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 blah. I'm
mhm,
just like, that means that like half the topics to talk about can't be talked about with that person. And so we have some values there, I think, that are really important. But to get personal, I think that on some level, I feel like we're like soul brothers. And I was just like reflecting on our friendship because you were talking about like when we were in college. I think it was, you said, your junior or senior year, when you started like really leaning into friendships, and I was doing the same. And you were
mm,
one of the ones that I wouldn't say we were super close. We were just kind of starting our friendship, but you were
mhm,
one of the ones I became increasingly interested in. We lived in the same dorm. You were RA. I
mhm,
was the head chaplain, head RA, head chaplain, and I just
mhm,
began to just really be interested in just kind of you as a person. And we just
mm,
kind of kept. It's so strange to me, Trent. Like our friendship has just slowly and just sustainably evolved and
mhm, mhm,
grown from those days. And you might see that differently, but I feel like we have just constantly we've stayed in touch. We talked by phone. We almost never lived in the same city since college.
mhm, mhm,
And our friendships just, and when I went through my divorce and I stopped being a pastor, there was so much chaos in my life.
mm,
And I was constantly getting kicked in the stomach by
mm,
relationships I thought were friendships, but
mm,
people people couldn't handle me being a human. They needed me to be Joel. And what I began to realize is they were friends with Joel the pastor, not Joel the person. And for me, when the dust settled, there were very few people left. And you were one of them. You were okay with me being different. You're okay with me
mm,
evolving. Like if someone's not okay with that,
mm.
that tells me they
Yeah.
actually didn't love me. They loved an idea of me, or maybe they were
Mm,
attached to a certain kind of like persona, but you loved me. And our friendship, I think, got stronger. And obviously this podcast is the fruit of that. And so I just want to say, like, on some deep level, man, I consider you
mm,
one of my closest friends right now. Like, if you were just to put a stake in the ground, 2025, where Joel is now, Trent is like so necessary for me to feel good and happy. Like
mm.
you're a joy to me, man.
Well, Joel, I really appreciate that, man. I mean that means quite a lot to me, given what I've said. How much I care about friendship, like that's just pure gold to me. And I think you talked about how we've evolved, we've been evolving as people, and it's been wonderful to have a few friends who can still accept us when we're changing, because you had the experience of a lot of people falling off. And for me, one of the great litmus tests of friendship was when I left the church
Mm-hmm.
and left my faith behind. And not that, I mean, I had some friends who had a really, really hard time with it because they knew me as Trent, the fanatical Christian, and they wanted that to continue. Or even just they knew Trent as a Christian, they wanted that to continue. And so I allow people to have their different responses. But when I shared with you that I had left the church, I was so happy to have you accept me for who I was. It's not like you said, "Oh, Trent, I would have done exactly like you did." You did exactly the right thing, but you were curious about how I was growing as a person. You were happy that I was being my authentic self, and you were there to support the journey that I was on. And I've never felt an ounce of judgment from you for that. That was that kind of friendship has been enormously important to me over the past 10 or so years as I've walked in the other direction from the church, because I have lost friends or friendships have changed. And so that's been enormously important to have that kind of experience from you. But yeah, man, I appreciate you sharing that, dude. I also, I mean, I totally agree. I think we have a very similar sense of humor. We love movies. We just we started this podcast because we thought we had wonderful we knew that we had really amazing conversations, and they were reflective of having a friendship that we've had for 25 years. That's guys, is it that long? Yes, it is 25. It's been evolving and growing, and we're that friendship grows with us as human beings. So I'm really appreciative of that too, Joel, and I appreciate you saying those things, man.
Yeah, of course, man.
Yeah.
Hmm. And I need to say this because it's been bothering me this whole podcast. I let slip a word I normally don't say. I said, you guys are being pussies. I almost never say that word because I actually don't like it, because I think that, masculinity and femininity are mostly social constructs, and so, like, I think why I said that was because I want the bro who hates being called that to, like, perk up and go like, "What? Feel my challenge, bro." And I regret saying that in the way I said it, so I apologize.
Oh
uh,
God. Yeah, yeah.
Anywho, man, Trent, any final words to encourage our listeners, whether it's a woman who has other men in in her life, or maybe she relates a lot to some of the kind of difficulties with making friends of her same gender, or it's guys out there. How do you like make friends? I feel this challenge. How would you encourage them?
Yeah, I mean, I think my challenge to men would be, don't what is it? Rome wasn't conquered in a day. Like, don't conquer friendship in a day. What if you could just chip away? Just
Mm,
like you're struggling with friendship, or you have the sense that maybe if you pay, if you give more time to your friendships, would be really great. Like, just start by doing one thing. Just start by, there's a guy, maybe, and this is maybe more practical, is maybe there's a dude who's in your city that you either have known for a long time or you just met, whatever. Make that phone call. Set up that time to go out for a beer and follow up with it. Just see what happens. See what happens when you put it in your calendar. I've had moments in my life where because of a busy life, I've had to say, "Hey, this is a friendship where I got to set up a time to hang out with you, or a time to, we're going to hang out once a month at least, or we're going to talk on the phone once a month at least." Do that and see what it does for you. Um, I have discovered that, if I can have, three or four, like, really great social interactions, either a get together or a really great phone call, a lunch, or whatever it is, per week, I just feel like a different person.
hmm
And so I just challenge guys, just reach out to that person. That's what I do.
I love it. Get practical. Make some brave choices, and don't be a Pansy.
Although that's a good flower, a pansy.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. It's quite beautiful.
yeah.
All right. Well, friends, thank you for joining our episode of Lead Balloons, the Alchemy of Unpopular Opinions. Feel free to go to our website, leadballoonspod.com, or you can email us at leadballoonspodcast@gmail.com. Find us on all the platforms, audio and video, and we would love to hear from you, especially about this episode. What do you think? Trent, sign off for us?
Hey. Rock and roll. Let's do it. See you in the next one.
Peace.